When people earn money, they pay either income tax or national insurance if they're employed or self-employed. So national insurance is payable as well as income tax by anybody who earns money. So effectively, historically, the government have always used income tax as the means by which they have passed on tax reductions to people in the UK. In this case, they've moved to the use of national insurance. Now, why might they do that? Effectively, there's been a lot of talk within the government around the productivity of the country and trying to make that country much more productive in what it does. By using national insurance, you focus on the workers of the country and the benefit goes to those workers and not necessarily to people who've got other investments or other means of income from which they benefit. So the idea would be that by reducing national insurance, you will actually increase the money in the pocket of the people who are working and therefore hopefully encourage them to work more. To give an example, so for somebody earning around 35,000, which is about the average earner in the UK, that's going to save them the reduction is going to save them about £912 a year when combined with the announcement that was made back in the autumn statement. So it's not insignificant, and again, more money in the pocket means that people have got more money to spend, which should help our economy recover from the recession we're in. Okay, so at the moment, the new British ISA is actually more of a consultation about a British ISA as opposed to something that is available. But what it, to all intents and purposes, we're looking at is an extra £5,000 per year that can be paid into an individual savings account wrapper on top of the current £20,000 maximum. Now, there are other ISAs as well, but effectively what we're talking about is an extra £5,000. Now, we're in a consultation period at the moment, and that consultation period will start to look at how we're going to launch it, when it's going to happen, and all those things operationally in terms of that. However, the point is that what we're trying to do is encourage people, like in many other countries, to invest in UK businesses. By investing in UK businesses, that should give the economy a boost, UK businesses a better chance of succeeding and thriving. We've got a particularly buoyant growth industry within the UK, and at times, because of incentives offered by other countries, effectively money tends to move in those directions as opposed to in the directions that they should do. So to all intents and purposes, we're going to be trying to encourage money to flow to new businesses, a focus on not just large businesses but small businesses as well. I think bonds or loan stocks, whether that be government gilts or loans made by companies within the UK, will also be qualifying within it. But we'll see more when we see the end of the consultation. So the new British ISA isn't yet available, so the answer to the question is no. The consultation period is in place, so that started on the 6th of March and is due to finish on the 6th of June. So it's a relatively short period of consultation, and it looks like they're going to be working very hard to deliver it as soon as possible. I would expect probably by the new tax year. Child benefit is obviously a payment that's made to people with children in order to help them with the quite extensive costs of bringing children who are, when all said and done, future taxpayers up during their formative years. So in 2013, originally it wasn't means tested. That's the starting point. In 2013, the government brought in rules by which how much child benefit was dependent on the highest earner in the family, and it was reduced, so it was claimed back if somebody in the family earned over £50,000. Okay, so it's been identified that that is unfair. Now, if you consider a family where both the partners are working, then if both partners were, let's say, earning £45,000 a year, then that would mean that there would be no reduction in child benefit, whereas under the current rules it would be unfair where you've got a non-working partner and a partner who is then earning that £90,000 and would effectively lose all of that child benefit or have to repay it back. So in terms of the recognition of that lack of fairness, that has been formally recognised within the budget and will be dealt with in the coming months. In the meantime, what's happened is the threshold for child benefit is increased from 50,000 to 60,000. So the rules haven't changed yet, but by increasing that threshold, it's estimated that that'll take 170,000 families out of the calculation point. So that's a real positive for those families. In addition to that, what they've also done is to reduce the rate at which the child benefit is reclaimed for those that earn more than £60,000. So that will mean again that those reductions will be lessened in comparison to where they are today. So again, what we've got is a situation where those claiming child benefit, a significant proportion of the population will be much better off than they are currently under the existing rules. So the reduction in capital gains tax for those higher earners has come down from 28% to 24%. So quite a significant reduction in the tax that would be payable by those higher rate earners. The base rate for basic rate taxpayers is still 18%, so there's been no change in terms of that. Quite obviously, for anybody who is looking to sell a property before perhaps the general election and the possibility of a new government, paying less capital gains tax on that transaction may well be a benefit for them. For those that decide that perhaps they are going to sell a property because of the removal of the furnished property letting tax regime changing or being removed, then again it may well give them a sweetener in order to release those properties back into the market. So the abolition of that piece of legislation was primarily because it provided people who were letting out properties partly furnished, it gave them some very significant advantages over landlords who let in the long term. So things like it would provide them with on sale the ability to claim capital gains tax at only 10% as opposed to the rate applicable to property. It would provide for the income allowing contribution to pensions, where it wouldn't be on a long let situation. It would provide for mortgage interest to be reclaimed or used as a deduction against profits at 100%, whereas that isn't available. So there are significant benefits that were basically meaning it became too popular and abused. There's been a lot of talk within certain areas of the UK of this type of let being overused or creating greater demand within that marketplace and resulting in prices rising and people locals to that area just not being able to afford to buy property in that area. So I think a big reason for the removal of it is to perhaps encourage markets to settle down. It will, for people using it at the moment, it will effectively reduce their profitability. And in reducing their profitability, that may lead many of them to decide to sell rather than continue to let out on that basis and level the playing field going forward. So the concept of domicile is, which Dom refers to here, is quite an interesting and complex area. So domicile relates to where somebody considers their lifetime home to be or where they consider that they belong. So it's got nothing to do with where somebody is resident or where they were born. To all intents and purposes, it's a very different concept. The whole idea behind the non-dom process was to try and attract wealthy individuals who could be beneficial to investing in the UK to come to the UK and provide them with an attractive tax status in doing so. So it would effectively give them the option of paying tax only on income that is generated in the UK, and money that they left outside of the UK or income that they earned outside of the UK wouldn't be taxable. What that provided, therefore, for those individuals was the ability for them to pay a significant lesser amount of tax than UK residents would do in the normal course of affairs. So the removal of that non-dom option will basically mean that those individuals living in the UK will now be taxed in exactly the same way as everybody else, which obviously will increase revenues. What it could, however, lead to is those individuals choosing to move abroad or move to taxation climates elsewhere, and that could obviously be a negative. It has been a debate that's been raging for a long time about, one, the benefits of getting these people into the country, but then on the other side of the coin, the unfairness of them paying significantly less tax and therefore not paying their fair share of the running of the country. So I think that is the reason why it's come in. We will see where it takes us in terms of whether they stay or whether they go and in what quantity, and whether or not other means of making it attractive for them to stay might be announced in the future. It's probably not going to have any significant effect in terms of, in comparison to other of the changes in the budget. That being said, what it means is that for those people whose revenue is less than the new 90,000 threshold, and it's gone from 85,000 to 90,000, they won't be required to register for VAT. Registering for VAT is quite a big deal and takes a lot of work and creates a heck of a lot of hassle. And therefore, those that don't need to register will certainly heave a huge sigh of relief. The government's got pretty good at telegraphing what is in the budget ahead of the budget actually taking place. So it has become quite unusual for there to be any significant surprises in budgets, and I think this would be classified as one of those. I think on an annual basis, whenever the budget is there is always talk about things like the removal of pension, the tax-free cash on pensions, and probably a lot of the talk this time was focused in the potential for the government to remove inheritance tax, and of course that didn't happen at the end of the day. Probably if I was to pick the biggest surprise, it was probably the reduction in national insurance, given that he'd already announced a reduction in the autumn statement of 2023. So to follow that up with another significant reduction that would affect both employed and self-employed in a positive way was probably the biggest surprise for me.